Hi everyone, and welcome to 10 Minutes in the Word with Girlfriends in Grace with me, Nagazi. Girlfriends in Grace is an online destination catered to helping women tackle issues that they face in today's society by integrating spirituality and psychotherapy. So today's 10 Minutes in the Word, y'all, it is going to be a little bit heavy, but I think it's important that we talk about this and we discuss this because it is a public health crisis that is so disturbing and it plagues millions of women on a daily basis. So I want to talk about intimate partner violence, also known as domestic violence. In this video, I'll be using IPV or intimate partner violence. So intimate partner violence is an issue that I am passionate about because I've had the opportunity to counsel women who are victims of this particular population for the past year now. And it has exposed me, y'all, to the heartache, the brokenness, and the wounded-ness of this population. In addition, I have learned the many complexities of this issue and why it's not just as simple as asking the victim, well, why didn't she just leave? Because truthfully speaking, the numbers reveal the most dangerous time for a victim is when she leaves. So I think it's important that we talk about this because there are women in our churches that we sit next to on Sunday who are victims of intimate partner violence. And on the inside, she feels empty, she is broken, and she is praying that someone hears her silent pleas or notices the residue of her tears. But no one ever does. See, because her turmoil, it is hidden behind a mask that she puts on because victim shaming and victim blaming. So I think it's important as Christians, we really do start talking about this issue, especially because the numbers reveal that homicide by intimate partner violence is the leading cause of death for women between the ages of 15 and 44. And it is more common than muggings, automobile accidents, and cancer-related deaths combined. And so, like I said before, there's so many different complex pieces to this, but for the purpose of this video, I just want to analyze, I just want to talk about the victim who has left and why you feel a sense of loss of self, depression, emptiness, isolation. And I think it's important that we address some of these symptoms because the devastating reality for you, boo, is that the psychological wounds of IPV, it lasts long after the violence has ended. So I want to start off by identifying exactly what is intimate partner violence because a lot of times women don't even know that they're in an abusive relationship. So IPV, it can occur on a multitude of forms, appearing along a broad range of emotional and physical experiences. It can happen as a single incident of violence, or it can be an ongoing pattern of abuse. It can involve physical, emotional, financial, spiritual, and sexual abuse. And each form of abuse has its own array of tactics that the perpetrator will typically use, such as making threats, intimidation, isolation to control the person, name calling, minimizing the extent of the abuse, blaming the victim for the abuse inflicted on them, denying the abuse ever happened, using children to control the victim, and denying the victim their ability to make their own money or even taking the money to control it. Perpetrators of intimate partner violence will promote male privilege, such as telling the victim she is the servant and he is the master. The abuser has a master of this castle-like attitude, or being the one to define man and woman roles. Some abusers will go as far as taking biblical scriptures to assert power and control over the victim that harms them. And so what I will do is, because I literally just condensed all of that, I will link below a power and control wheel. It's something that we use when we're educating women about the different aspects of intimate partner violence. So now I want to take this a step further, y'all. So I want to talk about a common pattern of intimate partner violence is the abuser will typically switch between abusive and remorseful behavior. This is something that we call the cycle of violence. And so the cycle of violence is broken into 3 different stages. The first stage is called the honeymoon stage, right? So just like it sounds, it's a good stage. The stage is a magical time when you and your partner You two think you're perfect for each other. You are so in love. You are being wined and dined, showered with compliments, gift giving. There's so much passion, and then there's so much love. You two have feelings of strong attraction and ecstasy for each other. And so some of those physical manifestations may be you have butterflies in your stomach, or your heart, it starts skipping a beat when you're romanticizing about them, right? And so that's the honeymoon stage. The second stage is called the tension building stage. In this stage, tension steadily builds as the abuser starts to get angry, and communication, you'll notice, it starts to break down. Some common things in this stage the abuser will do is they'll become increasingly picky about small things. The abuser will start criticizing things that were once cute, that they once said, oh, that's just cute. They're criticizing that now. The abuser may make comments about your abilities, your appearance, and your character. The arguments, they become louder and they become more frequent. The abuser may make you stay at home. The abuser starts to restrict you from socializing with people you used to hang out with. Some abusers will even restrict what you read, what you eat, what you wear. So during this stage, you feel as though you're like walking on eggshells. The abuser tells you it's your fault, and if you would have just behaved and did what you were told, none of these arguments would even be taking place. So in an effort to ease the tension, you concede to the abuser. You start to apologize for things that don't even make sense to you. So that is the tension building phase, right? And so the next stage of this is the third stage, and it's called the explosion stage. This stage is the acting out period. During this stage, any type of abuse can happen. This can be the screaming, it can be the hitting, it can be the breaking of possessions, it can be hurting you, it can be hurting children, it can be hurting pets. This stage does not necessarily have to be physical. Remember at the beginning of this video, I mentioned abuse comes in different forms, and I listed them, and remember, just click on that link so you can go to the power and control wheel. But the key element I want you to remember in the explosion stage is that there is definitely an escalation of abuse. So after the explosion stage, you go right back into that honeymoon stage, and it takes place again. Only at my center, where I work with victims of IPV, we call this the recapture stage, because now on top of turning back into Prince Charming, the abuser, he starts to apologize for the abuse. Some abusers, they will plead forgiveness or show regret. They make promises never to do it again, or they blame you for the abuse. Some abusers deny the abuse ever even happened to minimize it. There's a lot of gift giving, a lot of compliments are happening, and so they're basically just trying to recapture you back into this. And so as the victim, you start to believe that the abuse is over and that the abuser will change. But unfortunately, that cycle, baby girl, it just goes over and over and over again. And what you'll notice too is that recapture stage, that time period, it gets shorter and shorter. And then that tension building stage, it gets longer and longer. So now you're like living in this cycle, and you're constantly receiving messages that no matter how hard you try, your efforts are just not good enough. So what happens from this, and a symptom of this, is now strong feelings of helplessness and powerlessness. They start to arrive. They start to arise in you. So what you're doing is you're experiencing learned helplessness due to IPV. And when you're experiencing this, the victim becomes passive, compliant, or submissive. The victim accepts that this is the way things are, and previous attempts to end the relationship or to get out has always gotten you into so much trouble with the abuser. So now you believe that maybe things are really just your fault, and you just stay. You're just there. And I wish I could tell you that even when you leave, that you're immune to these feelings of powerlessness and helplessness. But I can't. Because oftentimes I hear women who are experiencing sadness and emptiness and confusion and indecisiveness, things that used to be simple, like buying an outfit from the store, it becomes overwhelming because you simply cannot make a decision. And then a sea of despair suffocates your soul because you think back to the person that you used to be, but you aren't anymore, because you realize that he took something from you. See, your mental scars are the remnants of the trauma that you've endured at the hands of your abuser. And so now you're just walking around with these mental open wounds, longing from the depth of your soul for something to heal your pain. And you're searching desperately for something to fill this gaping hole in your heart, and you are crippled by darkness, but you are too broken to move. And as overwhelming and loneliness and emptiness as you may feel, girlfriend, I just want to sit here and I want to remind you that you are not alone in your pain, because God is walking right by your side. You two are strung together by your word called compassion. See, I want to divulge in that word compassion a little bit with you right now, because I remember it was a time where I started meditating on this word compassion, and it was when I was reading about the death and the resurrection of Lazarus in the Bible. And this story can be found in John chapter 11, and so I'll just briefly go over it with you, but you can go ahead and read it yourself when you have time. So a close friend of Jesus had fallen ill named Lazarus. So Lazarus' sisters Martha and Mary sent for Jesus, who was in a different town at the time. However, Jesus didn't come immediately. Jesus had told his disciples that Lazarus was sick, but he said he would not die from the sickness. Instead, this was all for the glory of God. So Jesus and the disciples, they just stayed where they were. And then Jesus one day said to the disciples, let us go back to Judea, because Lazarus had fallen asleep. The disciples thought that it was a good thing that Lazarus was sleeping, because it meant he would get better since he had fallen ill. But they were mistaking at the meaning of sleeping, so Jesus told them plainly, no, Lazarus has died. So Jesus and the disciples made their way to Judea, where Lazarus was in the tomb and his sisters were. And upon their arrival, they had discovered Lazarus had been in this tomb for 4 days now, dead. Many people had come from all over to mourn with Lazarus' sisters, Martha and Mary. When Martha had heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home with the other mourners. And so when Martha had reached Jesus, she said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She then goes on to tell Jesus that she knew God would give Jesus whatever he asked for. Jesus assured her, Jesus had assured Martha that her brother would rise again from the grave. And Martha had said she knew he would rise on the day of resurrection. Jesus then told Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And then he asked her, do you believe this, Martha? Martha replies, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is coming to this world. Sounds good, right? Okay. So then after that, Martha had went back home, and she had told Mary that Jesus was calling for her. So Mary got up and she raced to Jesus. So the people around her who were in the home with her thought that she was going to her brother's tomb to mourn. So they started going with her. So they followed her. So when Mary reached the place where Jesus was, she completely just fell at his feet and she started weeping. And she said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the people who had come along with her, they were also weeping because they were evoked, their emotions were evoked by her emotions. Jesus was deeply moved in the spirit and he was troubled. Some translations of the Bible say that Jesus was overcome with compassion, and some other translations say that his spirit, it groaned. Jesus then said to Mary, where have you laid him? So when Jesus said this, he was referring to where was Lazarus' tomb. And at the end of this story, Jesus had called Lazarus' name, and Lazarus awoke from the dead and he came out of the tomb. However, I want to focus on a different part of this. I want to focus on the different responses Jesus had towards the two sisters. See, when Martha went to Jesus, it was merely a dialogue. Jesus told Martha in that dialogue, I am the resurrection and the life, and anyone who believes in me will live. Jesus then asked Martha if she believed, which she responded yes. Yet her response did not move Jesus. However, when Mary went to Jesus, see, she collapsed at his feet and she wept. Her emotional turmoil was so powerful that it invoked weeping from the people around her, and it moved Jesus so much that he wept too. After that, Jesus, he just asked her, where did you bury Lazarus? See, two women said the same exact thing to Jesus. If you were here, Lazarus would still be alive. However, only one woman's outcry caused a call to action from Jesus. See, Jesus, he consoled Martha with his words. But with Mary, Jesus joined her in her suffering, and he took action to relieve her pain. See, compassion is what overcame Jesus when he saw Mary fall at his feet and weep. See, I'm going to focus on this word compassion. The word compassion, see, like the prefix word come in the word compassion means togetherness, right? And the Latin meaning for passion means suffering. This meaning opened my eyes to gain such a deeper and richer understanding of the word. I mean, it completely transformed my mind, which caused me to believe that when you are in a pit of darkness and you are experiencing loss, you don't know your own identity, you're experiencing depression, helplessness, brokenness, and that when you collapse at the feet of Jesus, right? It is compassion that will join you to in the suffering. Compassion is what allows Jesus Christ to co-journey with you through the pain, through the affliction, and through your agony. Compassion is the thread that tightly weaves together the heart of Christ to yours so that it beats again. Compassion has the ability to resurrect you from the grave so that you not only live again, but you also thrive. Compassion creates an atmosphere filled with love, unconditional positive regard, and acceptance so that you feel the hand of Christ caressing your wounds. Compassion, it fills the silence with the voice of God. Compassion creates these sacred moments between you and Jesus so that over time, your story, as you process it, you possibly discover that those moments of pain birth bravery, courage, freedom, heart, strength, love, hope, faith, and more. Compassion. It is such a simple word with a powerful meaning. Girlfriend, I want you to know that God, he is walking with you in your darkness, and he is holding this light of hope until you have enough strength to hold it for yourself. I hope and I pray that this deeper meaning of compassion, that it resonates so deeply within your heart as it did for me. I pray that God's reckless love will water that seed of compassion so that it grows into your ability to show yourself some self-compassion. Because on your journey to healing, after leaving such a volatile situation, it is natural to have so many overwhelming emotions. Sometimes your heart will feel like a heavyweight pulling you under until you just fall away. Every tear floods the palm of your hands like an ocean, and every hurt is as big as a mountain, and your cries, they sound as loud as a siren. And on the contrary, some days you may be filled with so much happiness, joy, you're productive, you're thankful, and you are at peace, which will cause you to think that you're okay. But then out of nowhere, you're back in this sunken place. So girlfriend, I don't want you to beat yourself up when that happens, because the healing process, it is not fluid. It is natural to have good days and bad days. But it is my prayer that you will show yourself some compassion on those not so pretty days. And I want you to give yourself some credit for everything that you accomplish, especially when you're dealing with depression. So if that means that you got out of bed that day to take a bath, and that is the only thing that you did, give yourself some credit. If you only checked the mail that day, give yourself some credit. If you only made it on time to work, give yourself some credit. Because it's little drops of water that eventually fill a bucket. So as long as you're taking a step forward, you are moving in the right direction. I urge you to hold on to your why, and you will discover your will. See, this week, when you are feeling suffocated by an enormous sea of despair, heartache, and pain, or your invisible wounds feel like they are being ripped open due to powerful emotions that are invoked by intrusive thoughts or a flashback, I want you to meditate on the scripture Jeremiah 29:11, which says, For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Girlfriend, God, he has a plan for your life, and it is to take you from a position of helplessness to hopefulness. And girlfriend, you may see shatteredness, but God sees whole. You may see damage, but God sees beautiful. And I am praying that God will help you believe what He sees, because God is going to restore you piece by piece. You're healing, and that takes time. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of 10 Minutes in the Word with Girlfriends in Grace. Remember to subscribe and to hit that notification button so that you know when there is a new video available. Alright, y'all, so I hope y'all have an amazing week. And I hope you take some time out to practice some self-care and some self-compassion. Until next week, I will see you all. Have a good one.